Good morning and welcome to Master Plan for Aging Webinar Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kim McCoy-Wade, Director of the California Department of Aging, and we're thrilled to be having this dialogue and conversation about work opportunity with and for older Californians. This is our second webinar of about a dozen we're having this winter and spring as part of the Master Plan for Aging. Our goal is to be informative, but just as important, interactive, to hear from everyone about priorities and recommendations for our Master Plan for Aging. We welcome you to join us every Wednesday from 9:30 to 11, from now to the end of April. Always a single topic, ranging from homelessness, transportation, retirement security, isolation, and more. We will always feature a state partner, a local leader, and a stakeholder advisory committee member from the Master Plan who can share personal stories, data, programs, services, and ultimately recommendations. We're always striving to include a diverse and inclusive range of voices, so please let us know if you have suggestions. As always, and in fact newly updated and refreshed, we have a brand new website, engageca.org, launched last week, which is your one-stop shop. You can find the Zoom link for each webinar, no need to register, and the previous week's materials will be there as well in case you miss one. So we're very excited that during this presentation we are in two-way communication, and so there will be polls that we will run throughout the presentation and then use them to have a conversation and dialogue. So while I do an introduction to the master plan to ground our work, you'll see the first polls running that will allow you to practice the technology and let us know who's here. Okay, so joining me both virtually and reality are our all-star lineup once again this week. Assistant Secretary Daniel Yu from the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, a critical partner in the Cabinet Work Group advising and guiding the Governor's Master Plan for Aging. Annie Chung, a local leader in the Bay Area from Self-Help from the Elderly. And Derek Lamb, a longtime partner, a Stakeholder Advisory Committee member for the Master Plan, a local service provider here in Sacramento, but a long and distinguished career in aging, including in the federal government. So we're thrilled to have Daniel Yu, Annie Chung, and Derek Lamb. Before I turn it over to them, I will briefly lay the foundation for why we are here, which is the Governor's executive order calling for a master plan. This was issued in June to the California Health and Human Service Agency and called for that partnership between a cabinet work group and a stakeholder advisory committee. Why is California doing this? Because California, like the rest of the country, is aging. A quick look through some slides. You see on the left how the California's age distribution in 1990, a lot of young people clustered there around the 20s and 30s. And then if you look ahead to 2030, you'll see that it's growing older as a state and will stay older as a state. Some people call that moving from pyramid to pillar, but California is aging. And it's not just that more people are aging, that more diverse folks are aging as well. Let's take a quick look at race and ethnicity. This is a very tiny slide from my esteemed colleagues at the Department of Finance, but if you take a minute with it, you can see each color represents a different racial ethnic group, and you can see the increase, particularly among Latino, but also in other populations, Asian and Native American and African American elders as well. So in short, aging is changing. We have more diversity among our aging Californians. More people are living alone for a variety of reasons. Family structure changes over the years. More are at risk of poverty, particularly with housing, basic income, and healthcare costs squeezing, and changes in retirement and pensions. And excitingly, there's more awareness of the stages of aging. As life expectancy comes to 80, there are different ages and stages of aging, including getting ready for aging, perhaps being a caregiver of aging, early aging, middle aging, late aging, just a lot of dynamic stages of life to plan for and support, and a true opportunity for our state. So with that, let me just do a quick run through how we're approaching the master plan work, and then we can get to it. We start with our vision. Of course, our governor's vision is California for all, and that includes across the lifespan, from young children all the way to later years. We're grounded in those values of choices, equity, dignity, inclusion and accessibility, innovation and evidence, and deeply partnerships, local, state, and federal government, philanthropy, and private sector. We can't do this alone, and we're not doing it alone. Our mission that we have chosen to accept is to produce a person-centered, data-driven 10-year California Master Plan for Aging by October of this year. The components are a state plan, local blueprint, a data dashboard, and resources to help local communities who want to take the next steps in their planning for aging. Lastly, to organize the work, because aging is everything and everyone and everywhere, we have organized the work among these 4 goals that we think all of us share. We all want services and support so we can live where we choose as we age and have the help we and our families need to do so. We all want livable communities and purpose in our lives, so we live in and are engaged in communities that are age-friendly, dementia-friendly, and disability-friendly. Health and well-being across the lifespan. We all want to live in communities and have access to services and care that optimize our health and quality of life. And economic security and safety. We all want economic security and safety from abuse, neglect, exploitation, and disasters and emergencies throughout our lives. That was a whirlwind tour. There's much more information about on engagedca.org about the stories, the data, and the approach that we're taking. To turn to workforce, we began with workforce, quite frankly, because this is such an important issue and there are so many components. Our very first community event was for Employ Older Workers Week, a national event. We were thrilled that Senator Hurtado invited us to Bakersfield, and our secretary, Mark Galley, of the California Health and Human Service Agency, were able to visit with the Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce and to have a great discussion about older workers issues, including farm workers and other issues for that regional economy. We also were able to visit to Los Angeles County and hear from them about their exciting leadership work on workforce. Here are just some of the few key facts that they shared with us. Thank you, LA County. The growth in the number of Americans 50 or over who are working or looking for work. The overall share, increase in share, that in 2022, over a third of the workforce will be 50 plus, up from a quarter just a few years ago. And high engagement among this workforce, experience, professionalism, work ethic, lower turnover, and knowledge. Recognizing these data trends, LA took bold action and moved the traditional Older Americans Act Title V employment programs that we'll be hearing more about, the Senior Community Services Employment Program, moved it into their job centers, the backbone of their workforce development program, to be operated directly by those workforce programs. This is a seamless approach that LA is delivering. The County Board of Supervisors passed the motion to do this in May 2018. And by July 2018, the senior programs were over at the job center. This seamless approach has strengthened collaboration, strengthened partnership, all in service of older workers. And it also confirms the Workforce Department's commitment to older adults in the workforce, both trends that we are seeing around the state and are happy to lift up and accelerate. With that intro, before we turn it over to our speakers, let's see who's here.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. So thank you everyone on the Zoom for participating and responding to the series of polls that we launched. What I'm going to do now is share the results of those polls. So first we asked, are you an interested member of the public or employed in fields of aging or workforce? And 52% of respondents indicated that they were employed in fields of aging. 43% of respondents indicated that they're an interested member of the public. And 5% indicated that they are employed in fields of workforce. Our second poll, we asked, what age group do you belong to? 32% of respondents indicated that they were between 55 and 64. 27% of respondents indicated that they were between 45 and 54. And tied for third place at 14% was between 65 and 75. And then finally, 9% of respondents indicated between ages 35 and 44. And the very last 5% indicated that they were 25 to 34. And then our third and final poll that we shared out with you during this introductory period, we asked, where do folks live in California? And coming in at first place with 50% indicated that they resided in Southern California. Tied for second place, both at 18%, is the Bay Area and Northern California. And then finally, 14% indicated they were from the Sacramento region. So thank you very much for responding to those polls, and please be looking for more as this webinar continues.
Thank you. That helps us know who's here and helps us know how to target our outreach more for the continuing series. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our state partner. We are so thrilled to have Daniel Yu, Associate Secretary of Strategic Enforcement and Partnerships. That's a great title, from the Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Daniel.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Yu, and I'll be speaking to you on behalf of the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency, which consists of various labor enforcement and workforce development agencies throughout the state, including the California Workforce Development Board, Employment Training Panel, Department of Industrial Relations, Agricultural Labor Relations Board, Employment Development Department, and Public Employment Relations Board. This presentation will focus on California's commitment to ensuring equity and that older workers in California have access to good jobs and to programs that will help them achieve those goals. To that end, we would like to first start the presentation by talking about some of the data that we have collected about job opportunities for older workers in California, including occupational profiles, as well as data about employment trends among workers by both ethnicity as well as race. Afterwards, we'll provide information on some of the many programs that California has in promoting better and more equitable employment opportunities and outcomes for older workers in California, as well as information on some of the newer programs that are currently being developed or implemented right now. So we'll go to the next slide and go straight into the data. California workers ages 55 and older represent about 21% of the civilian labor force, with approximately 4.127 million workers ages 55 and older in the labor force in California. We've seen that over the past 5 years, the number of employed persons who are ages 55 and over have increased by about 450,000 or so. And so workers aged 55 and over have accounted for 29% of all employment in California since 2014. What that means is that over the past 5 years, the percentage of California workers ages 55 and older, workers who have now retired or otherwise have left the workforce, have found employment at a rate that is greater than the California labor force overall, which is a positive trend. We'll go to the next slide. Here, additional data showing the number of California workers aged 55 and older who are in the workforce from years 2014 to 2019, and then the number of California workers ages 55 and older among the workforce who were employed. We see that both the workforce and the number of employed workers in California for workers aged 55 and older grew from approximately 3.54 million employed workers among a workforce of 3.75 million workers in 2014 to almost 4 million employed workers among a workforce of approximately 4.127 million in 2019. And in the next slide, we see that the takeaway is that over the past 5 years, we've seen the unemployment rate among California workers ages 55 and over decline from 5.7% to 3.3%, which represents a drop of over 40% and is a very positive trend. But we also want to dig a little deeper beyond the overall data and look more closely at trends that we're seeing in both occupational profile of California workers ages 55 and over, and also look at employment trends among workers by both race and ethnicity as well. So if we look to the next slide, we again see a mostly steady decline of unemployment rate among California workers ages 55 and over from 2014 to 2019. And as we go to the next slide, we see that based on the data from the U.S. Census Bureau, we see the number for California civilian labor force for workers ages 55 and older by race, as well as number of employed California workers age 55 and older by race as well. As we recall from the previous slides, the unemployment rate among California workers aged 55 and over were approximately 3.3% for 2019. Based on this data from the U.S. Census Bureau, we see that the unemployment rate for Asian and Black workers aged 55 and older were approximately between 2.5 to 2.7%, which is lower than the overall unemployment rate of 3.3%. However, for Hawaiian Pacific Islander workers aged 55 and older, the unemployment rate was approximately 6.9%, which is more than twice as high as the overall unemployment rate of 3.3% for workers aged 55 and older. And we look to the next slide. And again, based on data from the U.S. Census Bureau, we can see the data for California civilian labor force and employed workers for Hispanic workers aged 55 and over. In 2019, we are at approximately 4.1% unemployment rate, which is higher than the overall unemployment rate of 3.3%. However, we have also seen significant reduction in unemployment rate from 2014, where the unemployment rate was 8.04% for California Hispanic workers aged 55 and over. This represents more than 50% reduction in unemployment rate in 5 years, which is a fairly significant progress. Moving on to the next slide. Next, we wanted to talk about the occupational profiles of California workers aged 55 and over, and that we're looking not only at whether California workers are able to secure employment, but also what type of employment opportunities that they're able to secure. Here you'll see that the occupation types in which California workers aged 55 and over tends to be more represented versus California's workforce overall, as well as the annual average wages in 2019 for that occupation in California, courtesy of data from ETED and the Labor Market Information Division. The 4 occupations where California workers aged 55 and over tend to be more represented than the general California workforce are: 1, architecture and engineering; 2, management occupations; 3, community and social services; and 4, legal occupations. These occupations also generally tend to have some of the higher annual average wages, with 3 of the 4 professions, occupations, having an annual average salary of over $100,000 per year, and an average of the 4 occupations would be approximately $108,000 per year. The 4 occupations where California workers age 55 and over tend to be less represented than the general California workforce are: food preparation and serving related, computer and mathematical science, protective services, and healthcare support. The average annual salary of these 4 occupations were approximately $60,000 per year. So this was a brief overview of some of the data that we have regarding workers in California aged 55 and over, as well as access to employment opportunities. So moving on to the next slide. We wanted to give a brief overview of some of the many programs in California has in promoting better and more equitable employment opportunities and outcomes for older workers in California, in addition to information on some of the newer programs that are being developed or being implemented right now. We want to start by talking about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA for short, which is a foundational law in talking about the many workforce development programs we have in California. It is a federal law designed to strengthen and improve the nation's workforce system by providing access to employment, education, training, and support services. It has a focus in serving individuals with barriers to employment and seeks to ensure access to quality services for these populations. Eligible population for the program includes older workers. So moving on to the next slide. With WIOA as a foundation, in California, these are some of the employment services and programs that we have for older workers. First, we have programs under WIOA Titles 1 and 3, which is administered primarily by our local workforce development boards and America's Job Center of California and ETED. Title 1 includes programs and services designed to assist adults as well as dislocated workers. And Title 3 is the Wagner-Pacer Act, which provides programs and services through the America's Job Center of California. As we can see in these graphs, 32.16%, 51.6%, and 48.79% of total participants, respectively, in these programs, Title I for adults, dislocated workers, and Title III for workers ages 45 and over. Furthermore, there is also CalJobs, which is administered by ETED and is both a website portal and also available via apps on smartphones. CalJobs is an online resource to help both job seekers and employers navigate the workforce system, search for jobs and candidates, get additional information about the labor market, as well as other programs and services. There are also job search training workshops, which are a collaboration between America's Job Center of California and ETED that teaches techniques on successful job searches to workshop participants. We also have ETED-sponsored Experience Unlimited Job Clubs, which is a program that provides a place where job seekers can meet regularly with other career professionals to share job leads, provide support, and update their job search skills. Resources available includes workshops on job search strategies, resume evaluations, and networking opportunities. This program encourages individuals who are looking for employment opportunities in professional, managerial, or technical fields in particular to participate as well. And as we saw in the occupational profile data from earlier, older workers aged 55 and over tend to be more represented in these particular fields. This is in addition to other information and referrals to other services and programs as well. Now to the next slide. We wanted to look to the future and preview some of the programs and initiatives that are currently in development or are being implemented. So in the next slide, it starts with California's 2020 to 2013 Unified Strategic Workforce Development Plan, which serves as an agreement among the partners identified in WIOA and serves as a framework for the development of public policy, fiscal investment, and operation of the state workforce and education system. The plan is currently in public comment period and is available online on the California Workforce Development Board's website. And one thing that we are very excited about and is new to the Unified Strategic Workforce Development Plan for this cycle is that the California Department of Aging and California Workforce Development Board has formed a partnership, and this partnership will expand the state's ability to provide low-income older Californians with opportunities to access and receive training services and support that will lead to gainful unsubsidized employment. This includes looking for opportunities for alignment of both WIOA and senior community service employment programs together. Furthermore, local workforce development boards are also supplementing services for low-income older adults who need access to job training and skill-building assistance. And we move on to the next slide. We also have the Breaking Barriers to Employment Initiative. In October 2017, the California legislature approved AB 1111, Removing Barriers to Employment Act, with the purpose of providing individuals with barriers to employment the services they need to enter, participate in, and complete broader workforce preparation, training, and education programs aligned with a regional labor market need. The eligible populations include persons over 50 years of age who who need retraining for in-demand skills. In 2018, the initiative was funded with $15 million of funding, and grant programs were announced in October 2019. This is in addition to existing workforce development programs. Finally, the next slide. We're also very excited about the California Future Work Commission. The overarching goal of the Future Work Commission is to develop a new social compact for California workers based on an expansive vision for economic equity that takes work and jobs as a starting point. The Commission's primary mission is to study, understand, analyze, and make recommendations regarding, first, the kind of jobs Californians could have in the decades to come. Second, the impact of technology on work, workers, employers, job, and society. Methods of promoting better job quality, wages, and working conditions through technology, modernizing worker safety net provisions, and finally, figuring out the best way to preserve good jobs, ready the workforce for jobs of the future through lifelong learning, and to ensure prosperity for all. Therefore, the work of the California Future Work Commission will certainly have an impact on all California workers in the future, including older Californians. More information on the California Future Work Commission can be found at California Labor and Workforce Development Agency website, and the Commission will have their 6th convening on social policy, work, and economic security in Stockton on February 13th, 2020. So this was a brief overview of the landscape of current workforce development programs and initiatives that promote better and more equitable job opportunities for older California workers, as well as future programs and initiatives that are currently being developed and implemented. Thank you, and this concludes the presentation from the State Partner.
Thank you so much, Daniel Yu, for that great foundation with data, including those breakouts by occupation and race, and the trends and the exciting new initiatives in this area. And thank you to all of you for your poll answers. We learned a lot more about who's here. For those of you who are over 55 on the call, as you can see in the results, pretty close split between who's retired and who is employed, with a heavy public leaning, which maybe isn't surprising for this forum. And of course, a solid minority is under 55, so didn't answer this question. So then we wanted to delve a little more and ask, why are we working after 55? And interestingly enough, purpose edged out needed financial security. Again, work brings both of those things to all of us, ideally, meaningful work with meaningful pay and benefits. And there you see purpose edging out, and nobody's saying for extra spending money. And the chats were great. We had people say, I'm going to keep working as long as I have to pay off my student debt. Again, the intergenerational issues here with lifespan and aging. In that same vein, we asked, when do you expect to stop working? And this is something you can answer at any age, a good thing to think about. And the majority was before 70. More than half thought that before 70, we would stop working. But a solid 20% before 80 and 12% never. So excellent snapshot of the folks who are on this call. We do have some questions coming in for Daniel Yu that we will, let's do one here while we're just to keep it interactive. Daniel, if I could ask you and your colleagues, you'll see the question coming in asking about data based on gender identity. Many state departments now are looking at the acronym SOGI, Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, to collect data on gender identity to further all of our goals for California for All. The commenter says, many LGBTQ+ persons, especially lesbian and transgender, are underemployed and undercompensated. Could you speak to SOGI data, Daniel? We'll unmute you even.
Hi, thank you. This is Ashley from the Workforce Development Board. So we actually worked last year with AB 1111 and AB 677 to rewrite some data questions for CalJobs, which will actually be capturing this data. So right now it's not captured, but we are working on the implementation of sexual orientation and gender inclusive data, so that will be in effect very soon.
Thank you to Ashley and to the team at Labor Workforce, including the Workforce Development Board. We're so grateful for that partnership. The last poll question we asked in this section is a perfect introduction to our new speaker, and we'll keep monitoring chats and questions. We see an interest in talking about age discrimination, and that is coming up from Derek, so hang in there. But next I want to introduce Annie Chung, and look at this question. Are you 55 plus years of age and looking for work? The -- answer after the age carve out was, nope, I am 55, but not looking for work at this time. But there are close to 20% who would like full-time or part-time work. And so here to speak to a comprehensive approach to providing training and employment services to older workers, we are so honored to have Annie here from Self-Help for the Elderly with her talk on Targeted for the Limited English Proficiency and Immigrant Communities. Thank you, Annie Chung.
Thank you, Kim. Can everyone hear me clearly?
I believe so.
I'm going to start with our first slide. So Self-Help for the Elderly actually started in 1966 in San Francisco, Chinatown. Our mission really is to promote the independence, well-being, and dignity for older adults through culturally aligned programs. And our services now are in San Francisco, San Mateo, Alameda, Santa Clara, and we just started in Contra Costa County. So just a little background, Self-Help for the Elderly started back in 1966 really as part of the War on Poverty program. And over the last 54 years, we have assembled quite a comprehensive and holistic range of elder care services. We serve close to about 40,000 plus seniors in the Bay Area, mostly low to moderate income Asians. And Self-Help provide nutrition services and senior centers. We have 14 meal sites and centers in the Bay Area. We provide case management, information, assistance, and referral services. Employment and training is a big part of our core services. And we have a licensed home care and hospice program, a HICAP, which is the Medicare Counseling and Assistance Project. We have adult day services and Alzheimer day care. We have 3 affordable housing projects. We have Alzheimer, RCFE is the assisted living, but strictly for Alzheimer seniors with dementia. We have a transportation program for frail and seniors on disabilities. And we have a very large San Francisco Pathway to Citizenship initiative. Over the last 8 years, we have helped over 10,000 legal permanent residents to become U.S. citizens by doing these large-scale naturalization workshops. And finally, we have a statewide Team and Changes program funded by the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, for telephone and utilities, education, outreach, and intervention program. Next slide. So going more in details into our ETED unit, which is the Employment Training and Economic Development Program, you could see on the left side that our current programs really focus on vocational training. And following Daniel's presentation, we looked at the immigrant and particularly the recent immigrants with limited English proficiency. Immigrants have most of the times, no transferable skills and limited English. So we're very big with providing vocational training in these areas: food preparation, culinary, commercial cleaning, and custodial. We have a very successful certified nurse assistant and home health aide training program. And we also have just started a hotel housekeeping training program. Our core service in the employment area is the neighborhood access point. Many people refer these to the one-stop center for job search and job readiness. And we provide a wrapped around employment and job readiness program. On the chart side, as you see, some of the funding sources come from WIOA, which is the local OEWD, which is the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, that provide most of the workforce funding for our older workers program. But going through some of the current programs, the light duty community services is mostly provided to GA and SNAP recipients and also CalFresh recipients. So our funder mostly come from HSA, the Human Service Agency in San Francisco. We also do the SCSEP program that both Kim and Daniel mentioned, but we are a subcontractor of NAPCA, which is our National Asian Pacific Center for Aging. We're a subcontractor to provide Title V senior employment services in 4 Bay Area counties. And finally, our citizenship, our civics, and our ESL, English as Second Language class, comes primarily from CDA, Department of Education, and it's from WIOA Title II funding. Next slide. So the impact of our employment training and economic development program is pretty amazing. Over the last 54 years, since 1966, we have trained approximately 11,000 older workers through our sector vocational training programs and placed them in unsubsidized employment. We roughly train about 200 older workers a year. And we have helped older workers fulfill the 10 years or 40 quarters of FICA contribution to ensure older workers qualify for Social Security, retirement, income, and Medicare benefits. It's really important goal of self-help to make sure that our older workers fulfill this requirement, or else they would go to Social Security and ask for Medicare and Social Security retirement benefits without knowing that they have to work the 10 years. We supported self-sufficiency and job readiness and dignity in work for approximately 5,000 plus older workers through the neighborhood access points. And we raise awareness and support for older workers in the workplace, especially among large employers who employ quite a few older workers. And we continue to do our advocacy work, advocating for funding from public and private funders to support older workers' training, retraining, and employment programs. We also raise awareness of the needs of older workers, emphasizing the merits of hiring older workers. Next slide. So our success stories, I'd like to share two with you. And with recent immigrants, usually they have to take on very low pay and very intensive jobs that work like 6 days a week, 8 to 9 hours a day with about $1,000 to $1,500 a month. But with Mr. Chan's story, he's 69 and very limited skills, but after he was enrolled with our training program and some refresher courses, we found him a job at the San Francisco International Airport for $18 an hour beginning. So he was very, very happy. Similarly, 58-year-old Mrs. Tai, having graduated from the home health aid class, she almost immediately started making $20+ an hour. A couple of challenges that we are facing, that the age discrimination in the workplace appears to be growing. We must be vigilant in advocating to end ageism and discrimination against older workers and older adults. And because Self-Help for the Elderly, its partner had been the local community college, it's a San Francisco City College system that funded a lot of our training program for many, many years. But starting about 5 years ago, we're finding that the support from the community college system is fast diminishing and decreasing, and that will cut off pretty much access to our older workers seeking this type of training. So we're kind of concerned. So finally, just to summarize, this model we feel that is replicable and scalable and also sustainable. After all, we have been having this for over 50+ years. we always seek out the partners. In my previous slide, I listed all of the local funders that fund our older employment training program. So we continuously seek them out to fund our projects and programs. We're committed to providing ongoing support to the older workers who could stay on their job. This is very, very important. And we continue to seek subsidized training, technology training, refresher training, and English language training for the older workers. So I shared the quote from one of our participants. She said that she kept coming back to self-help for the elderly, even though she didn't speak Chinese and she didn't really live in San Francisco, Chinatown. But one staff member just took her aside and found a job for her, and then she became, you know, a regular client of our program. And when she has needs, she comes in and she felt very, very much at home. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. Thank you. Kim?
Thank you, Annie. We're getting so many questions and comments that people are really engaging with your presentation. Thank you. So let's go back and look at the polls. Thank you for sharing those stories. We asked people about this question of training and retraining, and about, I would say, roughly half-half. About half would say, yes, I am open to retraining at 55 to look at new skills in a job, and other half, 43% at this moment are content with the current career options and career path. And then these very important topics that you introduced, Annie, in sharing your success stories and also sharing the challenges. Discrimination is the #1 answer that people shared. And anti-discrimination efforts as a resource in the workforce to address anti-discrimination and ensure older adults are welcome and supported is the #1 resource that people have experienced. There's also been some flexible schedules, and thirdly, training and retraining. That is a perfect segue into our Stakeholder Advisory Committee member, Derek, who is going to speak about discrimination and myths and realities as part of the older employment picture. Derek, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Kim, for inviting me to speak today on the subject of work opportunities for older adults and persons with disabilities. I've known Annie actually for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of great work done by Self-Help for the Elderly. And I'm also very familiar with the Title V Senior Community Service Employment Program, because as a former Director of Client Services over at Self-Help for the Elderly, I work very closely with the CSAP program run by Self-Help, as well as hiring older workers graduated from the program to be placed in different divisions of the agency. And currently, as the President and CEO at ACC Senior Services, we are also a subcontractor of the National Asian Pacific Center for Aging to provide a Title V CSAP program. So it's indeed my honor to serve as one of the 34 stakeholder members of the Master Plan for Aging Advisory Committee. And I have to say I'm very impressed by the varying experience and expertise of all the members, and we work together for the better good of all Californians to make sure that we have a great plan in October 2020. And as a committee, we'll continue to develop parts of the master plan, and we'll advise the California Health and Human Services Agency and the cabinet level work group on aging in the development of the master plan. And by December 13th, actually, the California Health and Human Services Agency has collected over 600 public comments and recommendations, and of which 67 specific on work opportunities. And so when I'm going to present to you my reflection of the myths and reality and also recommendations, in part actually is based on those comments and recommendations. And also after this Wednesday webinar, I will report back to the full Stakeholder Advisory Committee on what we have learned from all of you today. If you would move to the next slide, as Annie has indicated, ageism is actually life and also has been existing. But I would like to qualify by saying that ageism is not only specific in the US, it's also happening in other parts of the world. And also, I think we have stigma against persons with disabilities as well. So what are some of the common stereotypes that we have come across in terms of myths pertaining to older adults and also to persons with disabilities? Now on this slide, basically some of the myths include that older adults are more likely to be burned out. They will take a lot of absence because of illness. They are poor at working with younger supervisors, and also they're reluctant to travel. But if you have read the AARP, the magazine article on the surprising truth about older adults, which actually was published in September 2015, the Sloan Center on Aging and Work has conducted a research, and they reported in 2009 that hiring managers gave older employees high marks for loyalty, reliability, and productivity. And it's indeed true. When it comes to employing older adults in my own agency, I find this is very, very revealing. Moving on to the next slide. There are some other myths about older adults, in that they are less motivated. They're generally less willing to participate in training and career development. They're more resistant and less willing to change. They're less trusting, less healthy, and more vulnerable to work-family imbalance. And then also look up another research done in Hong Kong by the University of Hong Kong. And in 2012, they have looked at age stereotypes on the 208,204 individuals. And they basically found that 5 out of 6 of those myths have no empirical evidence. Now, it's very interesting when we look at the electronic polling we just did. About 46% say they want retraining, and 46% feel that they don't. And so the only stereotype consistent with the empirical evidence is that older workers are less willing to participate in training and career development activities. And actually, this could be due to various reasons. So we cannot just look at a cookie-cutter approach and make a generalization on why older adults are not willing to be retrained. Now, moving to the persons with disability space, some of the myths include people with disabilities are not qualified applicants. They require more reasonable accommodations, and those are expensive. But then according to the Society of Human Resource Management, there are actually many qualified candidates with disabilities. And so employers in general should not assume that people with disabilities lack the necessary education, training, and experience for employment, and would not be able to perform essential job functions. Now, as a matter of fact, many employees with disabilities require nothing more than the same consideration an employer may already be providing to its non-disabled employees, such as flexible work schedules, telecommuting, or restructured workstations. So moving to the next slide, the other myth saying that managers can't expect the same level of performance from employees with disabilities. However, according to the EEOC, an employee with a disability must meet the same production standards, whether quantitative or qualitative, as an employee without a disability in the same job. So lowering or changing a production standard because an employee cannot meet it due to disability is not considered a reasonable accommodation. And so an employer should evaluate the job performance of an employee with a disability the same way it evaluates any other employee's performance. As I say, we have received over 600 recommendations and public comments by December 13th. And so what I'm going to present to you in terms of recommendations are based on some of those comments. I think first and foremost, starting from the very top, the state government in California should create executive order and or legislation mandating hiring of older adults and persons with disabilities, not only at the state level, but also in local governments and private companies. Now, it's easier said than done because people will say, what is it in for me if I do that, right? So you're the big government, you want us to do everything, according to the legislation. And to do that, I think it's very important to create more incentives for employers to offer employment for older adults and persons with disabilities. Whether it's a tax credit, something else, that's still up to, a decision. But I think it's very important. And I also think that, this is according to one of the public comments, create a statewide database of pledged employers dedicated to hiring older adults and persons with disabilities on finding meaningful employment. So if you move to the next slide. So I think also we have heard, stories, from Annie and how, many people and she has served. And so I think by looking at like a self-help for the elderly model on employment training and economic development for older adults in San Francisco would be one, example to look at. And then in the space for people with disabilities, actually the U.S. Administration for Community Living has acknowledged the wonderful work done by East Bay Innovations in Alameda because they have provided integrated employment support for people with disabilities in that county. And also for people actually who are formerly incarcerated based on one reason or another, and then they get older and then they want to enter the workforce. I think it's very important to consider supportive work opportunities for them so that they be, actually contributing back to the society. If you look at the next step in terms of recommendations, I think we heard about a lot of, stereotypes about older adults, and persons with disabilities in the workforce. And so I think we need to provide statewide campaign on debunking aging or disability as a liability. We need to start thinking of it as an asset. And last but not least, I think employers should create and promote flexible work schedules and work arrangements, such as telecommuting for employees. And so this will basically be, make it easier for everyone to find meaningful employment. The whole thing, I think, is we need to have a purpose in terms of creating, a comprehensive master plan for aging. And by looking at all this, stereotypes and the reality and also recommendations, I'm very, very hopeful that, California will become a better space for older adults and persons with disabilities.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective. As a career, as a federal, state, and local expert and partner in aging, we appreciate summaries of recommendations, both that we've heard from a broad perspective, but also your expert perspective on how you'd prioritize them. I just want to mention that the governor does have a task force on diversifying state employment, and I'm privileged to be working on the formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated task force. So look forward to learning more and sharing more on that front. Let's go to our polls and look at that barrier. Yes. By a 2-to-1 ratio, ageism during the interview and hiring, those myths persist, and there's a need to address that. The new reality, what else is on the polls? Let's see, ageism once you're at the workforce, the retraining opportunities and accommodations, much further back. What we wanted to do is engage you all in your recommendations, as well as answer a few of the questions. We've gotten some great feedback on ways to make this technically more smooth. We hear you. We'll make that easier. Some questions that we'll follow up with on making sure that Asian does it include all Asian communities, including Filipino and Cambodian. We're looking for answers on that, and also that we make sure we remember work is changing. As we heard from our colleagues in the Future of the Work Commission, there's contract work, there's gig economy, and being sure we're really defining work broadly as well. One data question before, actually, let me do the recommendations, open that up, and then we'll turn it to Daniel for the data question that came in. So locate your chat box, and we'd like for you to add, we just talked about the top barrier that came in was the ageism during interviewing and hiring is the top barrier to employment. We'd love to hear your thoughts in California with its diversity. For individuals who belong to groups that have experienced underrepresentation or discrimination in employment, such as people with disabilities or communities of color, the top barrier to job opportunity for older adults might differ. Please submit barriers to employment that are important to California's diverse communities in the chat box. And while you are chatting, I will hand it to this great question to our labor partners. Daniel Yu, can your team share with us the labor workforce participation rates of older Californians?
Thank you. So we have data from October 2019, so fairly recent data that indicates that the labor participation rate for Californians aged 55 to 64 was 64.8%, and for Californians who are ages 65 and older, that was 20.1%.
Nothing in chat. I'm looking at the chat to see the comments that come in, and I want to just really praise one of our commenters for a very sensitive comment, and we will treat it with sensitivity as well. This is the very sensitive subject of older workers who are struggling to meet job expectations related to cognitive changes. I think we could use some help with employers and HR professionals, some focused training on how to deal with sensitive issues, absolutely avoiding ageist stereotypes and discrimination, but also avoiding risk and inappropriately ignoring or delaying dealing with issues. Thank you for raising that sensitive issue. The question I'm hoping folks can chat on, are there other barriers specific to older workers of color, older LGBTQ workers, older workers with disability? We want to make sure that we're capturing the full intersectionality of people as we work, as we age. Did we leave anything off in the big topic of age discrimination that you want to be sure we capture to meet the California for All? While you're thinking about that, thank you very much for the question about the data. Advice to us to be sure and look at healthcare and the intersection between healthcare and employment and underemployment, people staying in employment for healthcare, healthcare cost burdens. We've certainly seen that in the Elder Economic Security out of UCLA, in the Elder Economic Security Index out of UCLA. So yes, all of these things fit together. There's a recommendation I can see coming in. Fund programs that pay for volunteer work. Oh, we are absolutely going to be featuring volunteer work in a future webinar. And we can share that there are some great models coming out of programs like AmeriCorps. This will be a little teaser for you to come back and learn more. That stipended volunteer programs like AmeriCorps are having success, even though they are not specifically elder corps per se, but that AmeriCorps too is diversifying and having more older volunteers, and that role of the stipend in that meaningful, positive experience. So volunteerism is coming soon. Emphasize the importance and thanking Annie Chung for raising up language barriers. Thank you for raising up the immigration barriers. Thank you, and starting a workforce, a work career in the United States later in life. And expectational barriers. The expectation that one should, quote, retire when you reach a particular age. This could be part of a general statewide ageism awareness campaign to make sure that there isn't this retirement expectation creating pressure and discrimination. What other recommendations do you have? Now, let me do an open-ended, and they're already started to come. It's wonderful to see. You didn't even need to wait for the prompt, and I'm grateful for it. Derek uplifted so many recommendations: regulation changes on discrimination, more support for employers, anti-discrimination awareness campaigns, targeted programs for populations like previously and currently incarcerated. What is your top recommendation? Send them in. Oh, another one has just come in about technology and the rapidly changing nature of technology. I certainly was struck in our labor colleagues chart about one of the higher income professions that had very low rates of older workers was computer and mathematical science. that was anomaly in that chart. And so how do we make sure that all of our workforce can stay up to date and comfortable and trained and retrained at every age, at every stage in technology? Great recommendation. Oh, someone has just given us a wonderful opportunity to share about the equity work group. Yes, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, as part of living into our governor's vision for California for All and our values around equity inclusion, has just created an equity work group. It'll be half Stakeholder Advisory Committee members and half general public. Applications closed this week and we got 35 applications. We're thrilled, hope to be making announcements about that by the end of the month. Their job will be to inform and advise all engagement activities and deliverables for equity lens and equity outcomes. So we I hear the feedback that that's not visible yet on the engageca.org. And so we will look for ways to make that more visible because that is kicking off in February. So thank you for allowing us to share the good news. Other recommendations, other questions, other comments? Oh, these are wonderful. Thank you to Crystal Milne for raising the point about language. She says, many older adults in my community have expressed that they don't feel that they are seniors, in quotes, and so do not engage with senior centers and other programs with that label. That has come up a lot. And Derek, I wonder if you could reflect on that, since you have the history of the Older Americans Act, the language around seniors, the new language around aging, even at the federal level, it's now community living. What are your thoughts about how we make sure that we are being inclusive and knocking down stereotypes in our language?
Well, I think one thing to note is people are being called names all the time. You know, it's like across different generations, different, ethnic groups. So number one, I think, is having a self-awareness that we need to be sensitized to the fact that, each individual is different, regardless of the age, gender, sexual preference, so on and so forth. And I think the, larger at the macro level is a larger definition of what, we want to do in the naming of, older adults or seniors. Is there like a common thread that, we can come to a consensus as to how we are going to name a group? I think it's a larger, question that, I individually, cannot, answer. But I think the master plan for aging can be a very useful forum to start that, dialogue and discuss, how can we change the impression of people towards older adults, towards persons with disabilities. What are kind of the terminology that we should be using, and how can we sensitize, one another so that, we'll be able to respect the differences and be more inclusive in what we are going to do. So I think that's a larger, policy question, and that needs to be looked at from macro level.
Yes, and we are trying to do that in the master plan, both on language and then hearkening back to systems, the Los Angeles County example of moving the Title V senior employment program, there's that word again, into the one-stop job center so that it is integrated. Aging services or community services, they're not off to the side, and they are easier to find. So that's a great point. I'm gonna ask a question that's come in that is gonna put my friend Daniel a little bit on the spot, but I think he has the answer to it, so I'm not too worried about it, which is the data that you just shared at the state level. Is it also available, the data in your slides and the data we've been talking about, do you also have data on labor force participation rates by cities or counties or regions or workforce areas? And I don't mean at this moment, but is that available? You can answer that.
Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. I apologize. But we do have that information is available online. So it is with the labor market info at ETED. So that information is available online on our website.
And then one of our goals at the master plan, you may have recalled from an earlier slide, is we are building a data dashboard on aging indicators. And our absolute goal is to link and leverage the existing data that partners like Labor Workforce Development Agency have, so that we could provide that kind of one-stop aging portal over to partners. So you could find that data by race, by income, by region, in all the ways that you are providing it, just to increase access and awareness. Couple other great comments coming in. Give me 1 second to read. Interesting conversations about, again, this connection between employer and healthcare. One panelist mentioned helping workers work to obtain 40 quarters to qualify for Social Security benefits. A case could probably be made for California investing in older worker placement with private employers, maybe through subsidies or tax incentives, to allow the underage older worker to have healthcare benefits, time to put money into retirement savings, delay early draw on Social Security, and allow them to boost monthly Social Security benefits. That's a fascinating idea of how to, again, make sure the federal role in this picture, which we have not highlighted in this presentation, but the federal role is appropriately and strategically leveraged by employers, states, and most importantly, older Californians. And Lorinda Reynolds, I'm seeing a very sophisticated comment from you that I am trying to translate. I'll do my best, and I'm sure you'll help me get it right. But just to remind us that we are careful not to engage in either positive tokenism or negative tokenism. That we can inadvertently reinforce myths and fuel the resistance, and to remember to stay evidence-based and to accommodate to comply, but also at tension between accommodations, required accommodations, and myths. So I know I am not capturing the full feel of that, and I apologize. So we will do our best to capture that better in ongoing dialogue with you. Thank you for your active participation. But it's a good reminder to all of us to not to reinforce the myths and trying to tackle them. Anything else? We'll have to do a last call for questions, comments, data. Oh, great. A shout out for the Mature Worker Council. Thank you, Lorenza, for letting us know that that was terminated a while back and was critical piece to the needs of older workers with training and education. Should be reconsidered. Thank you, we will do that. And other questions for employers, critical piece of this picture. How do we address that employers are decreasing matching percentages in retirement plans? Great, we will take that back too. Derek wants to share some breaking news.
Actually, I've been doing some research on older adult employments in other countries, and there's a report issued by the World Economic Forum indicating some countries actually are gaining the most by employing older workers. So if you look at a PricewaterhouseCoopers Golden Age Index, they assess the impact of older workers on different aspects of a country labor market. We find that actually Iceland has gained most with 84% of the 55 to 64 age range employment. New Zealand follow second, 78%, and Israel. And I think if you look at other countries who are doing this because they recognize actually, as I say, older workers are not a liability. The assets to the economy. So I think in the US, California can really take the lead in making that, happen by encouraging the employment of older workers, understanding that, California as one of the largest economies in the world can do it. And then we can ask other states to follow suit. So this is one of the things that I would like to bring to the audience by considering how other countries are really looking at older adult employment and how much gain they have made because of that.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up than to say California can do it. We can both look to other countries and also help lead the way. So thank you to all of you for the recommendations on policy, education, training, data, diversity, equity. All will be federal role, international role, all will be considered by our stakeholder and brought back to our committee for inclusion in the master plan. We hope you will join us next week, and in the coming weeks, we've got a blockbuster lineup coming focused on livable communities with our partners in housing, probably one of the hottest issues that has emerged in all master plan dialogues, which of course is closely linked to transportation and poverty, hunger, and homelessness. Also key to livable communities, emergency and disaster preparedness and response. We'll have experts from the recent power shutoff and fire sharing the lessons learned. And then turning a little bit to the inclusion, respect that is necessary to avoid the isolation that is far too common in older people, communities, and families. And so that's our February lineup we're so excited about. Hope to see you back and continue to welcome your feedback on how to improve this opportunity for dialogue and strengthen our recommendations in the master plan. Thank you very much and see you next week.